Hey friends, Nas here. 2022 was a wild year, and I'm glad that it's coming to a close. I hope you're all enjoying your holiday season, and that you've been able to enjoy the company of friends and family. I decided to put together a lengthy supercut of all the missing person cases that have been released so far. If you're new here, or maybe only caught one of the videos, then here they are in one full episode. This will be the last video of 2022, and I plan to release more in 2023. I appreciate the kind words from everyone throughout the life cycle of this channel. As always, thank you for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the new year. 20-year-old Abilene Patterson was last seen in Lumberton, North Carolina at 11:30 a.m. on September 5th, 2017. She mentioned that she had to run some errands and would be home in about a half an hour. She left from her home on East 9th Street and walked down the street towards Inglewood Avenue, where she got into a brown Buick sedan. Authorities later identified and proceeded with an interview with the car's driver. The driver was an acquaintance of Patterson. They said they dropped her off somewhere else. She has never been heard from again. Her mother reported her missing at 6 p.m. In the months prior to Patterson's disappearance, 3 women were found dead under unclear circumstances in Lumberton. The bodies of Rhonda Jones and Christina Bennett were found 50 yards apart from each other on April 18th, and the body of Megan Oxendine was found 2 city blocks away on June 3rd. All the dead women were found naked and in various stages of decay. All of them had struggled with addiction, as Patterson had, and the cause and circumstances of their deaths remain unclear. Authorities stated that there were few similarities between Patterson's case and the other women, and they don't think her case is related to the others. At the time of her disappearance, Patterson was visiting her mother in Lumberton after a stint in a Florida rehabilitation program. She lived in Jacksonville, Florida, and had last lived in Lumberton 3 years before. Her case remains unsolved to this day. 24-year-old Sarita Lynn Annis was last seen near Clear Creek Road in Crestview, Florida, on July 12, 2020. She was homeless at the time of her disappearance, but kept in close touch with her family. She talked to her mother on the phone almost every day. On the day of her disappearance, Annis called her mother and said she didn't like the people she was staying with because, quote-unquote, something shady is going on, and she didn't feel safe. Her mother suggested that she call back in the morning so they could decide what to do about the situation. Unfortunately, Sarita's mother would never receive another call. Annis has never been heard from again, and she left behind the backpack of clothes she normally carried with her everywhere. She also left behind 3 children. Her mother stated in spite of her mental health issue, and it's not like her to drop out of sight without warning. Sarita Lynn Annis' case remains unsolved. 20-year-old Kayleen Oling was last seen at her friend's home in Etna, Pennsylvania, later in the evening on January 9th, 2020. She left home to meet with her boyfriend, Michael D. Mano, and never came back. At 1:36 a.m. on January 10th, she texted her mom to confirm she'd see her at 9:30 a.m. and that she planned on babysitting her younger siblings while her mother was at work. Oling never arrived and disappeared without a trace. At around the same time, Oling called her mother. She posted on her Facebook account saying Mano had committed a robbery. Within an hour, her account had been deactivated. Since her disappearance, all calls to her phone have gone straight to voicemail, and her EBT card has not been used. Mano is considered the prime suspect in Oling's disappearance. He has stated she's alive, that he has been in touch with her, and knows her whereabouts. Unfortunately, he refuses to say where she is, or otherwise cooperate with authorities. After her disappearance, he sent explicit photographs of Oling to both her father and her 17-year-old sister. As a result, he was charged with corruption of minors. He has an extensive criminal record, with charges including theft, arson, criminal solicitation. In March 2022, he pleaded no contest to 1 charge of corruption of minors in connection with explicit photos and sentenced to 6 to 12 months in jail and 1 year of probation. No charges have been filed in Oling's disappearance, but she's considered to be in danger and foul play is possible. Oling's case remains unsolved to this day. 19-year-old Larry Darnell Stackhouse Jr. left his parents' home in the 100 block of Lynn Circle in Syracuse, New York, between 6 and 6:30 p.m. on December 2, 2005. Larry and his friends went to a basketball game at Christian Brothers Academy. When his parents woke up the next morning, their son had still not returned, and they reported him missing. Stackhouse's friends said he dropped him off at a store close to his home, but later changed his story and said Stackhouse got into an altercation with some Native Americans at the basketball game. Many rumors have circulated around that Stackhouse Jr. was killed and that his body was disposed in the Onondaga Indian Nation territory, but no hard evidence was ever found to support these rumors. Authorities have no evidence that he is deceased, but they consider his disappearance to be suspicious. At the time of his disappearance, he had 2 misdemeanor warrants out for his arrest, but investigators do not believe this is why he vanished. Several tipsters told authorities he was involved with, but his parents do not believe this. He had no criminal record, only traffic tickets. Stackhouse Jr. left behind a young daughter. He worked at a nursing home at the time of his disappearance, and his parents described him as a well-behaved young man who was going to get his GED and wanted to provide for his child. So what happened to Larry Darnell Stackhouse Jr.? Did he get into an altercation with Native Americans at the basketball game? Did someone else attack him? We may never know. Stackhouse Jr.'s case remains unsolved to this day. 15-year-old Kristen Marie Galvin was last seen at her grandmother's house in Spring, Texas on January 2, 2020. She has never been heard from again. At the time of her disappearance, Kristen was a good student and on her school's junior ROTC and drill team. She had run away from home once with her boyfriend and was found by police on Bissonnet Street in Houston, Texas, a week and a half later. Her family believes she was during this period, as the Bissonnet Street area is noted for its. Investigators believe Kristen may still be in Texas and may have been trafficked a second time. Witnesses reported seeing a photo of her on websites known for advertising. She may frequent the Bissonnet area of Houston, Texas, or she may be in Atlanta, Georgia. For her was reportedly seen online in the Atlanta area in March of 2021. She has not been found, and her whereabouts remain a mystery. 18-year-old Corinna Slusser dropped out of Bloomsburg Area High School, one class short of graduation, and moved in with her friends in her hometown of Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania in 2017. She had been a cheerleader in school and dreamed of becoming a makeup artist. She didn't get along with her mother and hoped to move in with her aunt in Massachusetts in January of 2017. In the summer of 2017, she met a man named Giovanni Pagero, who told her he could give her a place to stay in New York City. She traveled to New York City in July of 2017, taking only her cell phone and ID. She didn't even bother to take any extra clothes. When she got to New York, she would keep in touch with her family and friends, contacting them on a daily basis. She mentioned everything was going well, but after her late disappearance, her family found out she had been working as advertising on the internet to get clients. At 1 a.m. on August 25th, Slusser called 911 from the Harlem Vista Hotel in Manhattan, New York, and said Pagero, a man whom she identified as a pimp, had stolen $300 from her. When she confronted him, he grabbed her by the throat and slammed her against the wall. When police arrived at the scene, she was still very upset, shaking and crying. Pagero was arrested and charged with harassment, third-degree assault, and criminal obstruction of breathing. A temporary order of protection against him was issued by the court on Slusser's behalf. When her family in Pennsylvania found out about the attack, she downplayed it and told him that there was nothing to worry about. In September, Slusser's grandfather had passed away, and Slusser agreed to go to his funeral in Florida. But a day later, she called her mother and said her social security card and driver's license had been stolen, and she couldn't fly. She did, however, want to return home to Pennsylvania. Slusser's mother went to Florida for the funeral on September 19th, and Slusser was supposed to arrive home in Pennsylvania the next day, but her mother wasn't able to get in touch with her, and upon her return, she found out Slusser had never arrived in Pennsylvania. Her mother then reported her missing. Although Slusser's family last heard from her on September 20th, according to her family, She was last seen in the early morning hours of September 20th, leaving the Haven Motel on Woodhaven Boulevard by 68th Avenue in the Rego Park neighborhood of Queens, New York. Slusser had been very active on social media prior to her disappearance, but after September 20th, all of her posts had stopped. Investigators believe Slusser was controlled by several pimps, and in November of 2018, Ishiko Nwani, one of Slusser's pimps, was charged with a woman named only as victim number 1. The prosecution alleges that between September of 2017 and November of 2018, Nwani used coercion, force, and fraud to force victim number 1 to engage in and brought her to different states, including New York, for this purpose. He also bought online ads promoting, some of which featured Slusser alongside victim number 1 and offered a 2-girl special. Between September 10th and September 20th, the day Slusser disappeared, she exchanged over 800 text messages with Nwani. They reportedly had an argument on September 20th because victim number 1 was upset about his relationship with Slusser. Nwani said that he would take Slusser to another hotel to give her to another man. She was never seen again. In May of 2019, Nwani reached a plea agreement with the prosecution, pleading guilty to 4 of the 5 charges against him. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. At his sentencing, Slusser's mother asked him where she was and if she was alive, and Nwani replied, "Honestly, I don't know. I never passed her off to anybody. Is she dead or alive? I'm honestly not sure, but I pray she's alive." Slusser's disappearance remains a mystery to this day. 47-year-old Brenda L. Madison was last seen by one of her employees at the concrete business she owned, Ultex Coring and Sawing, in the 700 block of Spring Miller Court in Arlington, Texas, on April 8, 2020. She has never been heard from again. Her personal truck was in the repair shop at the time of her disappearance, and after she was last seen, her company's cell phone, purse, and other belongings could not be located. Madison is a single mother, and her loved ones described her as a responsible, dedicated parent and business owner who owned her own home. After her disappearance, her heavy-duty equipment, tools, company vehicles, and backup computer hard drives were stolen from the business. She had an elaborate home security system with cameras inside and outside of her home. But after her disappearance, the camera's hard drives and backup systems were pulled from the wall, and a large heavy-duty safe was missing from her home. In October 2020, the father of Madison's daughter moved into her former home, but Brenda was nowhere to be found. Madison is still missing under unclear circumstances, and her case remains unsolved. 15-year-old Rosalind Velasquez was last seen leaving her apartment in the Azalea Park area in Radcliffe, Kentucky, sometime in the early morning hours of August 24, 2020. She told a friend on Instagram Live that she had taken some pills and was walking outside in the woods. She took her medication with her but left most of her belongings behind, including her chapstick and iPhone earbuds, which she never went anywhere without. She has never been heard from again. According to her mother, although Rosalind liked going for walks late at night, it's extremely out of her character to leave without warning. Her mother stated that Rosalind developed a phobia of other people and became introverted after being bullied. She liked to hide in a walk-in closet in her apartment to cope with her anxiety. At the time of her disappearance, Rosalind was a student at the North Hardin High School, attending class from home due to the pandemic. She lived with her mother. Her father passed away when she was 5 years old. Her mother stated she took advanced classes and planned to go to college and work in the medical field. She enjoyed playing the violin, drawing anime figures, and playing with her cats. Rosalind is originally from Kansas and moved to the Radcliffe area, where she has family, 2 years before she was last seen. She may have remained in the local area after her disappearance. Her iPhone pinged in several different locations in the general area. Little information is available as to what happened to her, and her case still remains unsolved. 34-year-old Danielle Imbo and 35-year-old boyfriend Richard Patron Jr. were last seen at the Abilene's Bar and Restaurant in the 400 block of South Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on February 19, 2005. They had drinks with friends at the restaurant before leaving between 11:30 and 11:45 p.m. They mentioned that they were going to Imbo's home in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Their friends stated that both of them behaved normally and seemed happy that evening. Little did they know they would never see or hear from them again. Patron's vehicle is also missing. It's a black and silver four-door 2001 Dodge Dakota or Dodge Ram pickup truck with the Pennsylvania license plate number YFH2319 and possibly a NASCAR sticker with 99 in the rear window. Neither Imbo nor Patron have accessed their bank accounts or used their credit cards or EasyPass cards since they went missing. Their cell phones have stayed off. Imbo's purse and wallet have not been located. She had an appointment with a hair salon at 11 a.m. the next day, but never arrived. Patron and Imbo have one child each. Imbo has a toddler son, and Patron has a teenage daughter. Their loved ones have stated that they love their families, and they wouldn't voluntarily abandon them. The couple knew each other in high school and began dating 10 months before their disappearances, after they separated from their respective partners. Authorities have questioned associates of both people. Patron and Imbo's estranged husband had allegedly exchanged threats with one another over the phone, and Imbo had made multiple failed attempts to reconcile with her husband, who was involved with another woman. Shortly before she disappeared, Imbo told her husband and Patron that she wanted space from both of them. She was reportedly considering ending her relationship with Patron altogether. Their loved ones believe foul play was involved in their cases, and both families have accused members of other family of causing their disappearances. Investigators stated that very little evidence is available to indicate what happened to Patron and Imbo, but they have ruled out kidnapping and think a random act of violence is also unlikely. Their disappearances are being investigated as a double homicide, possibly a murder for hire. Imbo was employed as a loan processor for a mortgage company at the time of her disappearance, working out of her home. She lived on Dunbarton Road in Mount Laurel in southern New Jersey in 2005. Patron Jr. lived in South Philadelphia. Both New Jersey and Pennsylvania authorities are investigating their disappearances. Unfortunately, their cases remain unsolved to this day. Sky Elijah Metalwala was just 2 years old when he was last seen in Bellevue, Washington, on November 6, 2011. His mother, Julia V. Badakova, said he got sick and she was driving him and his 4-year-old sister to Overlake Hospital Medical Center in her brother's 1998 Acura when it ran out of gas in the 2600 block of 112th Avenue Northeast. Badakova left Sky strapped in a car seat in the unlocked vehicle, took his sister and walked to a gas station a mile away for help. When she arrived, she didn't buy gas, but instead called a friend who dropped her off at the car about an hour after she'd left it. By this time, Sky was gone. He has never been heard from or seen again. An extensive search of the area turned up no indication of Sky's whereabouts. Authorities did find a toddler's shoe, but later determined it wasn't his. Badakova did not have a gas can with her when she called the police at 9:50 a.m. to report her son's disappearance. Police learned that the car had not in fact ran out of gas and had no mechanical problems. Witnesses said they seen the car between 8 and 10 a.m. and there wasn't a child in it. Badakova refused to take a polygraph or speak directly to the police about her son's disappearance, communicating through an attorney instead. The rest of Sky's family members, including his father, Solomon S. Metalwala, cooperated with the investigation, and Solomon has been active in the search for Sky, whereas Badakova has not been. The couple separated in 2010 and were in the process of a bitter divorce. Both sides accused the other of abuse and they sought protective orders against each other. In December of 2009, while the Metalwalas were still married, they were cited for reckless endangerment for leaving Sky, then 3 months old, unattended in a car on a 27-degree day. They agreed to take parenting classes, do community service, and spend a year on probation. And after they'd fulfilled these requirements, the case was dismissed. The court had forbidden Solomon to have any contact with his children, and he hadn't seen either of them for almost a year before Sky disappeared. He claimed that Badakova suffered from long-standing mental health issues, including depression and obsessive-compulsive disorder that caused her to neglect her children's needs and herself. She spent time as an inpatient in 3 mental health facilities. Badakova said Solomon had anger problems and was verbally and physically abusive to her. She also made multiple allegations that he had abused the children. They were later ruled unfounded. Investigators learned no one besides Badakova had seen Sky for at least 2 weeks before his disappearance. and possibly much longer than that. But it wasn't uncommon for her to isolate herself in her home with her children for extended periods of time. She also habitually left her children alone in the house, notably for 11 hours a few days before Skye's disappearance, while she went through a long mediation session regarding child custody. They agreed to let Bedakova have custody and give visitation rights to Solomon, but less than a day later, Bedakova said she changed her mind. In the aftermath of Skye's disappearance, his sister was taken into protective custody and placed in a foster home. His sister was too young to provide any statements useful to the investigation. She only said her brother had been in the car that morning. Solomon was allowed supervised visitation with her, and after 6 weeks got custody of his daughter. In March of 2012, Solomon and Bedakova's divorce agreement was finalized. He got sole custody of both children, and she had no visitation rights. Following Skye's disappearance, Bedakova began seeing Alan J. Morgan and ultimately married him. Their relationship was troubled. There were incidents of domestic violence, and Morgan was jailed for violating a no-contract order against Bedakova. He continued to violate the order by making at least a dozen phone calls to her from jail. In the summer of 2015, Bedakova gave birth to Morgan's son. Child Protective Services sought custody of the baby, alleging both Bedakova and Morgan were unfit parents. Solomon believes Bedakova was responsible for their son's disappearance and thinks the custodial dispute has something to do with it. He stated he thought Bedakova might have given him to someone else to hide him. Although no suspects have been named in Skye's case, the investigation has focused primarily on Bedakova due to the circumstances of the case and her lack of cooperation. She was born in Russia and has relatives outside of the United States, and Solomon is from Pakistan, but authorities believe Skye is still somewhere in Washington state. The circumstances of Skye's disappearance are very unclear, and it's possible he went missing some time before his mother reported it. I feel bad for Skye, going missing at such a young age. He would be 13 now if he was found. Sadly, his case remains unsolved. 24-year-old Jennifer Joyce Kessie was last contacted by cell phone at approximately 10 p.m. on January 24, 2006. She was at a residence at Mosaic Apartments in the vicinity of the 3700 block of Conroy Road in Orlando, Florida at the time. She has never been heard from again. It is believed Kessie got up and left for work at approximately 8 a.m. the next morning, but she never arrived there. She was employed as a financial analyst at a timeshare in Ocoee, Florida at the time of her disappearance. Her co-workers notified her family after she did not show up to work, and her parents let themselves into her apartment. Nothing appeared to be out of place there, but Kessie was missing, as were her purse, her cell phone, and her black four-door 2004 Chevy Malibu, with a Florida license plate number H90KYC. 3 days after Kessie's disappearance, her car was found in a parking lot of the Huntington on the Green apartment complex at Americana in Texas, less than a mile away from her residence. Residents at the complex stated that the car had been in the parking lot for several days. Bloodhounds tracked Kessie's scent from her vehicle back to her residence. There was no signs that a struggle had taken place in or around her car, and a valuable DVD player had not been stolen. Authorities stated that they were looking for a person of interest in Kessie's disappearance after reviewing surveillance tapes in the area where her car was found. An unidentified person, around 5'3" to 5'5", was seen parking Kessie's car, getting out and walking away. Investigators are unable to confirm whether the person is male or female, and this individual is the prime suspect in Kessie's disappearance. They were wearing clothes similar to what a painter or manual worker would wear. Prior to her disappearance, Kessie had expressed concern that her apartment complex was unsafe. She had been living on her own for only a few months prior, and there were a few other residents in the complex which was under construction. Kessie stated she was frightened of some of the construction workers. It has not been proven that any of them were involved in her disappearance. She had a good relationship with her boyfriend and vacationed with him to the Virgin Islands the month she went missing. He is not considered to be a suspect in the case, as he has an alibi. It is extremely uncharacteristic of Kessie to miss work, be out of touch with her family, or leave her cell phone turned off. It has been turned off ever since she disappeared. There's also not been any activity on her credit cards or EasyPass. Unfortunately, Jennifer Joyce Kessie has been missing for almost 17 years. Sadly, her case remains unsolved. 37-year-old Nicole R. Burgess was last seen in Nashville, Tennessee on May 23, 2014. Burgess sent a text message to a friend that day, and this is the last time anyone has ever heard from her. She had planned to go to Sparta, Tennessee the next day but never showed up, and when her friends checked her house in the 900 block of Oakvale Drive, they noticed her car still parked in the driveway, with her purse inside it. The house, which was normally kept tidy, was in disarray. Burgess's 2 dogs were running loose without any food or water, and they had defecated several times on the floor. Neighbors reported seeing a car they didn't recognize at Burgess's driveway the weekend of her disappearance. One of them, a close friend of Burgess, reported seeing 2 individuals carrying something heavy out of the back door of the house in the early morning hours of May 24th. The witness recognized one of the people as Caleb J. Cannon, the father of Burgess's son, who was 10 years old at the time of his mother's disappearance. In October of 2015, Cannon was charged with Burgess's murder. He saw their son every other weekend, and she had mentioned him in her final text message and said they were arguing. After Burgess's disappearance, their son told a friend he might not see his mother anymore because she's probably dead, and he thought his father had killed her. Cadaver-sniffing dogs detected the scent of human remains at both Burgess's home and in the trunk of Cannon's car. Empty bottles of cleaning fluid, brass knuckles, and blood-stained bedding were found in Burgess's home after her disappearance. Authorities believe Cannon murdered her inside her home, put her body in the trunk, and disposed of it in an unspecific location. Cannon was tried for Burgess's murder in May of 2017. Their son testified against him. He maintained his innocence, but the jury convicted him after less than 2 hours of deliberation. He was given an automatic life sentence. Foul play is suspected in Burgess's disappearance due to the circumstances involved. So who was the second person involved that was mentioned by the witness? What really happened to Nicole Burgess? Where is she? The remains of Nicole Burgess have never been recovered, and the case still remains a mystery. Zayla Walker was just only 2 years old when she went missing in Las Vegas, Nevada on August 22, 2018. She was living in North Las Vegas with her mother, Lakia Walker, and maternal grandmother, Carla Richardson, in the 4600 block of Mission Cantina Avenue when she disappeared. Carla had filed a missing persons report for Lakia, Zayla, and Zayla's father, Ricky Beasley, on August 25, 2018. It was in that time period that Carla hadn't seen Zayla for approximately 2 weeks. Lakia headed to a job interview on August 15th and left Zayla with Ricky. The father had refused to return Zayla back to Lakia. Like any mother would do, she contacted the authorities to try and get Zayla back to her. While doing so, she begged Ricky to return Zayla through text messaging. Ricky told Lakia he would only return Zayla back if she paid him $13,000, in which Lakia promised she would raise the funds for him. During that period of time, Lakia mentioned to her mother that Ricky took Zayla to California to visit with a relative. On August 22, 2018, Carla last saw Lakia leaving in a hurry and saying, "I'll be right back." According to Ricky's mother, late on August 21st, she heard a loud noise from his bedroom that woke her up out of sleep. She dashed to the hallway to see Zayla crying in Ricky's arms. Ricky stated to her that he got angry when Zayla wet herself, and he threw a cot against the wall. The next day, Zayla and both Ricky and Lakia disappeared. According to a case summary, the couple had taken an unannounced trip, leaving Lakia's wallet, her vehicle, and cell phone behind. During the said trip, they traveled throughout California and then headed east through New Mexico, Texas, Illinois, West Virginia, and Tennessee. Later on, Lakia stated that she had slept in the car at rest stops and never stayed long in places. September rolled around, and by the 17th, Lakia and Ricky had run out of funds, so they returned to Las Vegas to get Lakia's credit and identification cards. Lakia met up with one of her cousins there, but dropped out of sight again once her cousin asked about Zayla. Once they were on the road again, Lakia and Ricky traveled across the border and into Tijuana, Mexico to spend 2 days there before making their way back to California. The San Diego police caught on to the two and questioned them about a missing persons report, but the couple told them that no one was in danger and that Zayla was with Ricky's relatives. On November 17, 2018, Lakia and Ricky were detained in Houston, Texas, when police ran their names at a traffic stop and learned about their daughter's disappearance. Zayla wasn't with them, and they told authorities that they hadn't seen her in several months. Lakia originally stated that Zayla was with Ricky's relatives and was released 48 hours after being detained. Ricky was, however, booked with possession of a stolen vehicle, since he was driving his mother's car without her permission. After getting out of jail in Texas, Lakia and Ricky returned back to Las Vegas, where they were detained by authorities there in December of 2018. Lakia was released, but Ricky was subsequently jailed on charges of first-degree child abuse and neglect, and also charged in the kidnapping of Zayla due to her disappearance. Lakia was interviewed several times by authorities and failed a polygraph test. She claimed that Zayla was with various other people, including Ricky's ex-girlfriend, his brother, and his mother. With this information, detectives were led to believe that Zayla was not alive. Ricky's stories changed and didn't line up as well, with even at one point stating that Zayla was with Lakia, and another time mentioned that she was with his mother. Both of the couple's phones were investigated, in which they left behind in Las Vegas when they took their trip. Ricky's phone showed a Google search history on how to stop seizures in children, and even looking up if would help. He even went to a dispensary that day to purchase some. Investigators were able to confirm that Zayla was never in custody of any of the family members after her disappearance in August of 2018. Neither Ricky or Lakia reached out to anyone about it either. Investigators are led to believe that Zayla suffered from a lethal injury at the time of her disappearance, and had passed away from the result. They believe that her parents went out of their way to dispose of the body as well. Although Ricky's mother stated that she kept her vehicle normally clean, Lakia mentioned to the authorities while Ricky and her traveled around the country that a terrible smell emanated from the trunk, a smell that smelled like rotten meat. Both Lakia and Ricky tried to get rid of the smell by vacuuming and cleaning the trunk with lemon-scented ammonia. Lakia was a nervous wreck and begged for Zayla to be returned in mid-August, when Ricky refused to give her back. After August 23rd, she suddenly stopped showing any care or concern for her daughter's whereabouts or well-being. She never tried to call or text Zayla on her 3rd birthday, nor sent a card or a present either. In March of 2019, Ricky, who was still incarcerated from other charges, was charged with murder and disappearance of Zayla, and Lakia was arrested with the same charges. After being arrested, Lakia asked the police, "So you're telling me that you found Zayla?" Zayla's body has yet to be discovered, and her whereabouts or any evidence leading up to her disappearance has yet to be solved. 24-year-old Brianna Jade Vibert was last seen at a Marathon gas station on Miller Road in Flint Township, Michigan, on July 17, 2017. She often went there to charge her phone or use the bathroom. Surveillance video from the gas station shows Vibert appearing anxious, even panicked, and she had blood on the inside of her right forearm. According to Vibert's boyfriend, just before she went to the gas station the night before her disappearance, they had gotten into an argument. He said the argument began because Vibert's 4 children weren't able to visit her house because there was no running water there. Vibert's boyfriend stated she was screaming, throwing things, and cut her arm with a knife before she left the house that night. At 1 a.m., at the Marathon gas station, she got into a red Pontiac Aztek driven by a man. After her disappearance, the man contacted police and cooperated with the investigation. He has not been named as a suspect in her case. He said she asked him for a ride to a restaurant, and she visited a local adult entertainment club where she had previously worked. Employees at the club said Vibert was in pretty bad shape when she arrived, and she left with the same man who'd given her a ride at the gas station earlier. She was sighted at a mobile gas station at 2:45 a.m. Surveillance footage there showed her stumbling inside the building, holding on to shelves to stay upright. Afterwards, she was filmed walking into the parking lot. The man she'd gotten rides from was traveling in the opposite direction. She left her phone behind in the red Aztek and has never been heard from again. Days later, police found her bag in a ditch near her home. The man in the red Aztek had her phone for 6 days before he charged it and turned it on, which led to his discovery by police. Vibert left behind 4 children. She had gotten divorced shortly before her disappearance and had a rocky relationship with both her ex-husband and her new boyfriend. According to her mother, Vibert's new boyfriend physically abused her, and when her friends offered to help, he threatened them. Although Vibert's mother stated she didn't maintain regular contact with her family, she also stated that there were times when Vibert would refuse to answer her phone for weeks. Vibert's early childhood was traumatic. She was adopted by a Binghamton, New York family at the age of 3, but the first adoption failed, and she was placed with another family who moved to Michigan with her. Investigators are not sure whether she is voluntarily missing, and her case remains unsolved. 25-year-old Samantha Rose Sperry was last seen in Graves County, Kentucky on March 28, 2018. She and her boyfriend, Renly Hendrickson, got into a verbal altercation in the 4200 block of Tim Road. Hendrickson decided to take Sperry's car back to her home to spend the night, and Sperry left with his father, Dusty Holder, on a four-wheeler. Holder later said he and Sperry got lost after the four-wheeler got stuck in the mud and then ran out of gas, so they spent the night in the woods and began walking out the next morning. According to Holder, the two of them came out of the woods at the Kaler Bottoms, by the bridge near Highway 131 and Highway 849. They were cold, wet, and tired. He suggested they walk to the Kaler Mart to warm up and get something to eat, but Sperry told him she was going to her cousin's house nearby. They parted ways. Holder went to the Kaler Mart, and she was last seen walking toward Highway 849. She never showed up for her 9 p.m. shift at work and has never been heard from again. That evening, after Holder told Hendrickson what happened, Hendrickson called his mother and told her he had taken pills and was going into the woods to die. The next morning, police launched a search for both him and Sperry. Her car was found abandoned at the intersection of Highway 131 and Dooms Chapel Road, south of Simpsonia, Kentucky. Authorities found Holder's four-wheeler during a ground search. There was only one set of footprints around it, and one set of footprints leading out of the woods. Investigators also found 2 cell phones, both of which belonged to Holder, in the ashes of a small fire. They stated the evidence at the scene didn't match Holder's story, and there was no sign that Sperry was even in the vicinity. Hendrickson resurfaced on April 1st, when he went to Holder's house, dehydrated and hypothermic, and asked for assistance. He was taken to the hospital for treatment. In his account to police, he stated he had taken items belonging to Sperry and to himself into the woods, and had lost them. These items were never recovered. Both Holder and Hendrickson were questioned multiple times about Sperry's disappearance, and both men passed polygraph tests about it. Sperry's sister doesn't believe she got lost in the woods prior to her disappearance, as she had lived in the area her whole life and was very familiar with the woods. Police later found blood in Sperry's home and in her vehicle, and it was sent to a lab for analysis. She was separated from her husband at the time of her disappearance, and they shared joint custody of their children. Her family fears Sperry became a victim of foul play, but the circumstances of her disappearance are unclear. Her case remains unsolved to this day. 20-year-old Heather Rochelle Elvis was last seen in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, at 2 a.m. on December 18, 2013. She went on a first date on the evening of December 17th, and her date dropped her off at her house in the 500 block of White River Drive, just off of River Oaks Drive. Elvis called her female roommate, who was visiting relatives out of state, at 3 a.m. to tell her how the date went. The conversation ended at 3:41 a.m., and this is the last time anyone spoke to her. She's never been seen again. At 10:43 p.m. on December 19th, the day after she was last seen, Elvis's dark green 2011 Dodge Intrepid with South Carolina license plates was found locked and abandoned at the Peachtree Boat Landing along the Waccamaw River in Socastee, South Carolina. Her keys, purse, and cell phone were missing from the car, and they haven't been found. The place where Elvis's car was parked is out on the outskirts of Myrtle Beach, and only about an 8-minute drive from her parents' house. She liked to go out in the water occasionally, but she never went out late at night. Elvis was romantically involved with a 37-year-old married man, Sidney Moorer, prior to her disappearance. Her roommate stated that the relationship had ended more than a month before her disappearance, but on the night Elvis went missing, there were several calls back and forth between her and Sidney. The final call was at 6 a.m. According to Elvis's roommate, Elvis was upset and crying, that Sidney told her he was leaving his wife to be with her. Sidney denied this and said he hadn't seen her since October. He admitted he called her at 6 a.m. on December 18th, but said it was only to tell her to stop calling him. In January of 2014, William Christopher Barrett and Garrett Ryan Starnes were charged with obstructing justice in Elvis's case. Authorities stated neither man was actually involved in her disappearance, but both had interfered with the investigation and posted false information on social media. Barrett is a friend of Elvis's father and allegedly tried to conduct a parallel investigation and search for Elvis. He denied having meant any harm. On February 21st, both Sidney and his wife of nearly 20 years, Tammy Mahoney, were arrested for 2 counts of indecent exposure and 1 count of obstruction of justice each. Shortly thereafter, they were charged with Elvis's kidnapping and then with her murder. Investigators believe they kidnapped Elvis and then murdered her at the Peachtree boat landing where her car was found. In March 2016, however, the charges of indecent exposure, obstruction of justice, and murder against the couple were dismissed. Sidney was tried for kidnapping in June of 2016, but the jury was unable to reach a verdict, and the case ended in a mistrial. He was later found guilty of obstruction of justice and sentenced to 10 years in prison. In October of 2018, Tammy was convicted of kidnapping and conspiring to kidnap Elvis and sentenced to 60 years in prison. Authorities believe she and Sidney lured Elvis to the Peachtree boat landing on the night of her disappearance. Sidney was tried again in the case and found guilty of kidnapping and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Elvis is described as a responsible young woman. She did not have a history of dropping out of sight. She is a graduate of the St. James High School and had 2 waitressing jobs at the time of her disappearance, one at the Myrtle Beach House of Blues and the other at the Tilted Kilt Pub and Eatery. She had been offered a job as a makeup artist at a local salon and was supposed to start work the week of Christmas. According to her loved ones, prior to her disappearance, Elvis had lived a life of an ordinary young woman. She was active on social media and had many friends. Foul play is suspected in her case due to the circumstances involved. Heather Rochelle Elvis has never been found. 21-year-old Maura Murray was involved in a 1-car accident on Route 112 in the Woodsville section of Haverhill in northern New Hampshire between 7 and 7:30 p.m. on February 9, 2004. Her car, a black 1996 Saturn with Massachusetts license plates, failed to make a sharp turn and ran off the road, striking a tree. This was the second car Murray had wrecked inside of 3 days. She had previously damaged her father's vehicle in another accident. A resident near the site of the February 9th crash called the police, even though Murray asked him not to. She had vanished by the time authorities arrived at the scene, about 10 minutes later. Her car was left behind, severely damaged in the front end and not in a drivable condition. The doors were locked and a few personal belongings, including Murray's cell phone and her bank cards, were missing, but most of her possessions had been left inside. Murray has never been seen again. There were no footprints in the snow around the car and no indications of a struggle, and tracker dogs lost her scent within 100 yards. Police believe she got a ride from the scene of the accident to parts unknown. The witness to the accident says she did not appear to be injured, but she may have been intoxicated. Murray resided in Hanson, Massachusetts, and was a student of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst at the time she disappeared. She was a nursing major and a Dean's List student, and was employed by a local art gallery in addition to having a job on campus. She planned to take a nursing job in Oklahoma after her graduation. 4 days before she disappeared, she left her job early at a supervisor's suggestion. She appeared to be extremely upset about something and was unable to work. It has not been discovered what was bothering her, but Murray's sister spoke to her on the phone the same evening and said that their conversation was normal. Murray emailed her professors the day of her disappearance and said there was a death in her family and she had to go away, but would be in touch upon her return in about a week. No one had actually died. After her disappearance, Murray's dormitory room was found packed up, as if she was planning on moving out altogether. She withdrew $280 from her bank account the day she disappeared, but there's been no activity on her bank accounts or credit cards since then. She packed up all of her belongings in her dormitory room into boxes, and left behind a personal note for her fiancé, an Army lieutenant named William Roche, who was stationed in Fort Still, Oklahoma. Murray also emailed Roche on the afternoon of her disappearance. In the email, she asked to speak to him. An untraceable call was made the day after she was last seen. Murray called Roche, but he only heard her breathing on the line. Investigators inspected Murray's computer after she vanished. They discovered that she'd been searching on the internet for information on hotels in Burlington, Vermont. Based on this information, they checked Burlington hotels for any signs of Murray, but turned up with no clues as to where she was. Murray and her father went hiking together in Burlington area in the fall of 2003, but she has no other connections to the city. She used to camp regularly in New Hampshire and knew the state very well, but there are no known reasons why she would go to Haverhill. Extensive searches of the woods around Haverhill had turned up with no evidence as to her whereabouts. There is speculation that Murray's case may be related to the disappearance of Brianna Maitland, a girl who vanished from Montgomery, Vermont on March 19, 2004, and she's still missing. Montgomery is only about 90 miles away from Haverhill. Both of them are attractive brunette young women, and both disappeared after car accidents in which their cars were left behind with personal items inside. The FBI met with the local authorities to discuss possible links between the cases. However, they concluded that despite the apparent similarities, the two females' cases were probably not connected to each other. The theory is not being entirely ruled out, but investigators believe it's unlikely. Murray was a student for 2 years at the United States Military Academy at West Point, where she met Rosh, before she transferred to the University of Massachusetts. She had majored in chemical engineering at West Point. She is described as a quiet, introverted, and extremely athletic person. She may have been carrying a backpack at the time when she vanished. Murray's family says it's uncharacteristic of her not to contact them, and they fear she's being held against her will. She had not been having problems with her family or her boyfriend at the time she disappeared. She has no history of mental illness. Police do not suspect foul play was involved in Murray's disappearance. Maura Murray's whereabouts remain a complete mystery to this day. 26-year-old Yingying Zhang was last seen in Urbana, Illinois on June 9, 2017. In April, she had moved from China to attend the University of Illinois as a visiting scholar. She had gotten her master's degree in environmental engineering at Peking University and was researching photosynthesis and crop productivity in soybeans and corn at UI. On the day of her disappearance, she was running late to a meeting to sign a lease with the landlord. She was sighted on surveillance footage near the B4 parking garage on North Goodwin Avenue at 2 p.m. Zhang had just gotten off a bus when a black four-door Saturn Astra hatchback pulled up beside her. She had a brief conversation with the driver and then got into the vehicle. She has never been heard from again. The driver of the car that Zhang got into was Brent Christensen, who had earned his master's degree in physics from UI in May of that year. Christensen claimed he let Zhang out of the car a few blocks away. His car was located on June 28th, and on June 30th, Christensen was charged in federal court with Zhang's kidnapping. Authorities learned that on the day Zhang vanished, someone matching Christian's description had been driving around in a black Saturn Astra, posing as a police officer, and this person attempted to lure at least one more woman into his car. But the woman was suspicious and refused to get inside the vehicle. A forensic examination of Christian's phone revealed he had visited an online fetish forum called Abduction 101 and subforums called Perfect Abduction Fantasy and Planning a Kidnapping. Police also noticed that he had cleaned the car's front passenger door more thoroughly than the other doors and thought he was trying to destroy evidence. In October, Christensen was additionally charged with kidnapping resulting in death. The indictment said he acted in an especially heinous, in that it involved torture or serious physical abuse to the victim. The prosecution is seeking the death penalty against him. Christensen attended a vigil for Zhang at the UI campus on June 29th, and his girlfriend did as well, whom the police had convinced to start recording his conversations. She secretly recorded hours of his conversations and later turned them over to the FBI, who was by then investigating Zhang's disappearance. At the vigil, Christensen talked about the sort of person that makes an ideal victim. In another recording, he said he kidnapped Zhang and took her to his apartment, and that she fought and resisted him. He talked about how he hit her in the head with a baseball bat, stabbed her in the neck, and decapitated her. He also claimed he was a serial killer, and that she was his 13th victim, and said she would never be found. In spite of efforts to clean the bedroom with bleach and Drano, police found blood matching Zhang's DNA on the underside of the carpet underneath Christensen's bed, behind the baseboard of the bedroom wall, and on the mattress. They also found a baseball bat stained with Zhang's blood. At Christensen's trial in June of 2019, his defense admitted he killed Zhang, but disagreed with the prosecution as to how and why he did it. His defense argued he was drunk when he made the recorded confession of murder to his girlfriend, and that he suffered from mental illness and should not be executed. Christensen was convicted of murder. The prosecution sought the death penalty, something Zhang's family also wanted, but the jury could not unanimously agree, so the judge sentenced him to life in prison. According to her fiancé, a classmate from Peking University, whom she planned to marry in October of 2017, studying in the United States had been Zhang's longtime dream, and she was enjoying herself while being there. She planned to complete her doctorate at UI, return to China, and take a position as a university professor. She was devoted to her family in China and called her parents every Saturday. She had been accepted at several universities, but chose UI, in part because their financial aid would mean she wouldn't be a burden to her parents. Foul play is suspected in Zhang's case due to the circumstances involved. Sadly, Yingying's whereabouts are yet to be solved. "23-year-old Heather Danielle Teague was last seen sunbathing at Newburgh Beach in Henderson County, Kentucky on August 26, 1995. A witness was observing the beach area through a telescope from across the Ohio River at approximately 12:45 p.m. The witness told authorities that he saw a Caucasian man approach Teague at the time. The abductor allegedly grabbed Teague by the hair and dragged her into the woods off of Newburgh Beach at gunpoint. The abductor was approximately 6 foot tall and weighed 210 to 230 pounds. He had brown hair and a bushy brown beard. He was wearing jeans and did not have a shirt on. He was also reported to be wearing a wig and a mosquito net at the time he abducted Teague. Authorities searched the Newburgh Beach area later in the day and discovered part of Teague's bathing suit near the alleged abduction site. Additional evidence was also located, but nothing investigators found could lead them to Teague's whereabouts. Marvin Ray Dill, a resident of Henderson County, Kentucky, was pulled over in a routine traffic stop after Teague's disappearance. He drove a red and white Ford Bronco, which was identical to a vehicle a witness reported was parked next to Teague's car on Newburgh Beach. Authorities discovered a hair resembling Teague's, 2 guns, 2 knives, duct tape, rubber gloves, and a rope in Dill's vehicle at the time of his traffic stop. The truck had bloodstains on the inside tailgate. Dill also strongly resembled the composite sketch made of Teague's abductor. Investigators received several tips connecting Dill to Teague's case in August of 1995 and arrived at his home to question him. Dill reportedly told his wife to leave their residence after becoming alerted to law enforcement's presence before officers could enter the home. Prosecutors compiled available evidence against Dill after his death and brought the information before a grand jury. Another possible suspect in Teague's case is Christopher J. Below, a native of Henderson, Kentucky. He pleaded guilty to attempted involuntary manslaughter in connection with the 1991 death of Catherine Vetzer and is serving a prison sentence of 11 to 18 years for the crime. Vetzer's body has never been found, but Below confessed to shooting her and pleaded guilty to attempted involuntary manslaughter. He's also considered a possible suspect in the disappearances of Mary Kushtu, Shailene Farrell, and Christina Porco. Investigators believe Below may have attacked other women who physically resembled Fetzer. Both Teague and Fetzer had long dark hair and were about 5 foot tall and 100 pounds. Below was known to be in the general area where Teague was abducted, but shortly after she vanished. On the same day, although the witness to Teague's abduction consistently identified Dill and not Below as the kidnapper, authorities believe they have circumstantial evidence to tie Below to the crime. They believe Below and Dill may have done it together. Perhaps one grabbed Teague and the other drove the getaway car. Below has not been charged in connection with Teague's case, however, due to the lack of conclusive evidence linking him to the crime. In February of 2013, Teague's mother filed a lawsuit against local, state, and federal authorities in connection with her daughter's abduction, alleging maleficence and a cover-up. Her mother claims law enforcement focused on the wrong suspect in Teague's kidnapping and failed to follow up on leads that would have led the investigation elsewhere. The litigation is still pending. Heather Danielle Teague's disappearance remains unsolved, and foul play is suspected due to the circumstances involved in her case. 27-year-old Brian Randall Schaefer was last seen at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a bar near Ohio State University campus, between 1:30 and 2 a.m. on April 1, 2006. He had gone there to celebrate the beginning of spring break with several of his friends, and they drank shots at the bar. Security cameras at the bar show him entering the establishment, but never leaving it. He was last seen speaking to 2 college-age women inside the bar, and has never been heard from again. Schaefer's car was found parked at his apartment, which was near the Ugly Tuna Saloona, after he had vanished. None of his personal belongings disappeared with him, and his cell phone, credit cards, and bank accounts have not been used since he went missing. Schaefer's loved ones described his disappearance as highly unusual. He was a second-year medical student at OSU at the time of his disappearance, where he made excellent grades in school. He and his girlfriend, also a medical student, were planning a vacation to Miami, Florida for spring break, and were scheduled to fly there on April 3rd, 2 days after he disappeared. His family reported him missing after he missed his flight. Schaefer was in love with his girlfriend and reportedly planned to marry her. His mother died of cancer 3 weeks before he disappeared. He'd been close to her and was grieving her passing, but his friends and family stated he was not inordinately depressed. In May of 2006, someone broke into Schaefer's apartment. The burglary turned out to be unrelated to his disappearance. Schaefer's father looked in the Olentangy River for his son's remains after he disappeared, but turned up with no evidence. His father was killed in a freak accident in September of 2008. Schaefer's only surviving relative is his younger brother. Authorities do not believe Schaefer left on his own accord, but it's unclear what caused him to disappear. Unfortunately, Brian Randall Schaefer has not been located, and his case remains unsolved. Sarah Grace Hoggle and Jacob Gabriel Hoggle were very young kids. Sarah was only 3 years old at the time, and Jacob was only 2 years old at the time of their disappearance on September 7th, 2014, in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Initially, they were both abducted by their non-custodial mother, Catherine Ashley Hoggle. Catherine has had a history of mental illness since she was a child, and was eventually diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. In August of 2013, she was involuntarily placed in a psychiatric hospital and was put on medication to help her balance out. After Catherine was released from the hospital, she moved into a group home but then relocated in with her children's father, Troy Turner. Catherine was enrolled in a day treatment program that was supposed to be her alone and not with her children. On September 7th, 2014, while Turner was at work, Catherine and the children were spending time at her parents' house. At around 4 p.m., Catherine used her father's gray 2007 Nissan Rogue and mentioned to her parents that she was going to take Jacob to get some pizza. She left and didn't make it back for about 2 hours later. Jacob was not with her, and the pizza wasn't with her as well. When asked, she told them that Jacob was at her friend's house, and the parents believed her story. The only problem was Jacob was not there. Catherine's parents brought her and her third child back to Troy's house. Troy had left for work and came home around midnight and realized Jacob was not in his bed, but also noticed that Jacob wasn't home either. Jacob often slept with one of his siblings, and Troy thought that maybe he was sleeping with one of them. The other thing was, young Sarah Grace wasn't home either and was last seen around 9:30 p.m. The next morning, Troy woke up and noticed that his oldest son was home, but Catherine, Jacob, and Sarah Grace were nowhere to be found. Troy then immediately called 911 and saw Catherine pulling into the driveway. He went outside to confront her about what was going on, and she told him that she had taken the kids to a daycare center in Germantown, Maryland. Troy believed her story and told the 911 operator that it was a false alarm and hung up the phone. Troy took Catherine to her treatment program and picked her up at around 2 p.m. He suggested to Catherine that they go pick up the kids at the daycare together. She stated that she couldn't remember the name of the daycare, but would direct him on how to get there. On the way there, Troy asked questions, where Catherine was evasive to answer. Getting nervous about the situation, he told her that he was going to the police about it. She casually asked him to stop by a Chick-fil-A first to get a drink, and as they did, Catherine escaped out another door and vanished. 4 days later, Catherine was found walking down a street in Germantown, Maryland, wearing the same clothes when she disappeared. The police questioned her about where the children were, and Catherine originally told them that she had left them with an old high school friend named Aaron. She also led police to a playground in Germantown, where she said she abandoned both kids there. Catherine was arrested and charged with misdemeanor counts of parental abduction, neglect, and hindering a police investigation. She was committed to Clifton T. Perkins Hospital Center, which is a maximum security psychiatric hospital in Jessup, Maryland. Doctors deemed her incompetent to stand a trial. Unfortunately, Catherine hasn't been deemed ever since, and a person who is charged with misdemeanors and who isn't mentally competent to stand a trial can only be held for a maximum of 3 years. In September of 2017, 3 years after the children's disappearance, Catherine was charged with 2 counts of murder. She is still held in the hospital and is still not deemed mentally competent to stand the trial. Although the police believe Catherine murdered Sarah Grace and Jacob, there's no evidence to back it up, or even to indicate the whereabouts of both children. Catherine has told staff that the kids are safe, but continues to keep their whereabouts a secret. Sarah would be 11, and Jacob would be 9 years old if they were successfully found today. Sarah Grace and Jacob Hoggle's disappearance remains a mystery. 19-year-old Brandon Victor Swanson was last seen in Marshall, Minnesota on May 14, 2008. It was the last day of classes at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby, Minnesota, where he was enrolled in a wind turbine program, and he had gotten out with a friend to celebrate. Swanson was on his way home to Marshall when he accidentally drove his car into a ditch, where he got stuck. He wasn't injured in the accident. He called his parents on his cell phone at 12:30 a.m. and asked for help. His parents were unable to find him, so Swanson said he was going to walk to the nearby town of Lynn, Minnesota, where he could see lights. He was on the phone with his father while he was walking. Shortly after 2 a.m., Swanson suddenly swore, and the call ended abruptly. His father tried to call him back several times, but he never got an answer. Swanson has never been heard from again. His father spent several hours looking for him, then notified the police at 6:30 a.m. The following day, authorities used cell phone records and located Swanson's car. It was about 1.5 miles north of the Lyon and Lincoln County line, off Highway 68 west of Taunton, Minnesota. There was no sign of him at the scene. An extensive search of the area turned up with no sign of him. The car wasn't anywhere near the place Swanson said it was. He had been 20 miles away from there. Apparently he had gotten confused about his location. Although there were some accounts that he had been drinking alcohol that evening, investigators don't believe he was intoxicated or otherwise impaired when he disappeared. Some authorities believe he slipped and fell into the Yellow Medicine River while he was walking in the dark. The river can get pretty deep in some places, and it was running high and fast at that time. Searches of the river didn't produce his body, however, and there's no evidence to support any theory. Swanson is a 2007 graduate of Marshall High School. He had made arrangements to transfer to Iowa Western Community College in Council Bluffs, Iowa, in August of 2008. He planned to eventually enroll into a 4-year university and have a career in the sciences. He had worked at a Hy-Vee food store for 4 years before his disappearance. Swanson's mother described him as an avid reader with many interests, and he was very devoted to his family. A law made for Swanson called Brandon's Law was passed later in 2008. The law requires Minnesota police to begin an immediate search for missing adults under 21, as well as older adults who are missing under suspicious circumstances. Sadly, Brandon Victor Swanson has never been found, and his case remains a mystery. Three-month-year-old Jana Rivera was last seen in Indianapolis, Indiana, on May 28, 2015. She lived with her parents and 2 older sisters in the 4100 block of Candy Apple Boulevard in the Orchard Valley Farms subdivision. They had moved there just a few weeks earlier. Just before 9 a.m. on May 29th, Jana's mother, Yolanda Rivera Gonzalez, called 911 and said Jana was dead. She later called back and recanted this statement, saying instead that her boyfriend had taken Jana the night before while she was at work and she didn't know where they were. Police later said Yolanda had trouble making herself understood due to a language barrier. Police questioned Jana's father, Jeffrey D. Fairbanks, who was Yolanda's boyfriend, after finding him lying in bed upstairs. He was drunk at the time, and he said he couldn't remember much, but that he had picked Jana up, and she wasn't moving. He added that he was quote-unquote so scared and didn't want to go to jail, but wanted to get on with his life. The day after Jana was reported missing, Fairbanks said he would take police to her body. He led them to a dumpster at Mason Garden Apartments on the northeast side of the city. By then, however, the dumpster had been emptied. A few days later after Jana's disappearance, Yolanda filed an order of protection from Fairbanks. In the order, she said Fairbanks had beaten her regularly, once a month or so, over the past 2 years, and that he would choke her, push her, and strike her. On one occasion during an argument, he sprayed her with a fire extinguisher. Yolanda said she had never gone to the police to report the assaults because she was afraid of Banks. He was, however, found guilty of domestic battery in connection with a 2013 case involving his then-wife. Fairbanks told several stories about what happened to Jana. At one point, he said he woke up at 5:30 a.m. to the sound of Jana crying. He gave her a bottle and she drank it, and he stayed up for a few hours. He said when he changed Jana's diaper, he put a pillow over her face to muffle her cries. In a letter to the local news media, Fairbanks said he woke up at 1:30 p.m. and realized Jana had died in her sleep, apparently of natural causes. He wrote that in a panic, he wrapped the baby's body in a blanket and took it out to the car, because he did not want the other children to see it. It didn't occur to him to call 911, he said. He drove around Indianapolis for 8 hours, eventually left the body in the dumpster, then lied to Yolanda and his family and said he buried it. One of Jana's sisters remembered hearing Jana crying at around noon on the day of her disappearance. She said Fairbanks came downstairs with the baby at 1 p.m., and the other child in the home asked where he was going and why he was carrying Jana like that. The sister caught a glimpse of Jana's face, and her eyes were closed. Fairbanks then took Jana out to the car, left and did not return for 8 hours. When he came back, he was drunk and crying and said that she was dead and he couldn't save her. Jana's sister stated Fairbanks was careful with Jana when he was sober, but when he drank a lot, he would yell at Jana and hit her when she cried and fussed. He also sometimes covered her face with a pillow to get her to stop crying. In August of 2015, Fairbanks was charged with murder and neglect of a dependent causing death. In April of 2017, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, a jury found him not guilty of murder, but guilty of neglect of a dependent causing death. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. An extensive search of Indianapolis, in fields, ponds, and landfills in Shelby, Hancock, and Marion counties turned up with no sign of Jana's remains, although police did find a blood-stained blanket, and Yolanda identified it as her daughter's. Sadly, 3-month-old Jana has never been found. Foul play is suspected in Jana's case due to the circumstances involved. "30-year-old Stephen Thel Kosher was last seen leaving his residence in St. George, Utah on December 12, 2009. The following day, he spoke to 2 of his friends on a cell phone and said he was in Las Vegas, Nevada. Being a devout Mormon, Kosher offered to turn around to cover a church meeting for one of his friends, but his friend said not to worry about it. Stephen Kosher was never heard from again. On December 14, 2009, Kosher's white 2003 Chevy Cavalier was found abandoned in a cul-de-sac in the 2600 block of Savannah Springs Avenue, in an upscale residential neighborhood of Henderson, Nevada. A video surveillance camera in the area showed him parking the car and leaving it there on December 13th. He walked down the sidewalk, crossed the street, and walked out of the frame. He was alone and didn't appear to be disoriented. It appeared as if he had a destination in mind and had parked in the location for a reason. Kosher's shaving kit, coats, pillows, and blankets were inside the vehicle, as well as Christmas gifts he'd purchased a few days before, but his cell phone, wallet, and driver's license were missing. His laptop and cell phone charger were left back at his home. His car had a half tank of gas in it when he left. About 5 hours after Kosher left his car, his cell phone signal pinged up at a tower several miles away, near Arroyo Grande Boulevard and American Pacific Drive. 2 hours after that, the signal pinged in the subdivision near Sunset Drive and Stephanie Street. Early the next morning, someone checked Kosher's voicemail, and the signal was picked up by US 95 and Russell Road. The phone stayed at that location for 2 days before the signal was completely lost. It's unclear why Kosher traveled to Nevada. He is originally from Amarillo, Texas, and graduated from Amarillo High School in 1998, where he went on to graduate from the University of Utah. He had been living in Salt Lake City, Utah, and working for the online division of the Salt Lake Tribune, but he quit his job and moved to St. George in April of 2009. His family stated he was having trouble finding a job, and may have gone to Las Vegas to seek employment. He did not drink alcohol or use because he was true to his religious beliefs. There was speculation that Kosher's disappearance was connected to the December 2009 disappearance of Susan Powell, who was last seen in West Valley City, Utah on December 7th. Because Kosher was about the same age as Powell and disappeared from the same state at approximately the same time, investigators looked into the possibility of their disappearances being linked. Powell's husband actually suggested that they had run away together, possibly to Brazil, where Kosher had been there before on a missions trip. Authorities found no connection between the disappearances and no evidence that the two of them knew each other, however. Kosher's parents stated that there was no indication that or planned to walk out of his life, and authorities can't find any evidence of foul play either. He was having financial problems at the time of his disappearance due to his unemployment, but his loved ones don't know what could have caused him to vanish. Both Utah and Nevada police are investigating Stephen Kosher's disappearance, and his case remains a mystery. One-year-old Ayla Bell Reynolds was last seen at 8 p.m. on December 16, 2011, when her father, Justin DePietro, put her to bed in their home on Violet Avenue in Waterville, Maine. She apparently vanished during the night and has never been seen again. Her father called the police at 8:50 a.m. the next morning. Justin, his sister, his girlfriend, and the women's 2 children were at the residence all night, the night Ayla vanished. Authorities maintain the baby's father has not been cooperative with the investigation, and they believe the adults who were in the home that night are withholding information. Investigators found Ayla's blood in multiple places in Justin's home, including her first-floor bedroom and his basement bedroom, which is where he slept that night with his girlfriend and her child. His sister and his sister's child slept on the first floor. There was about a cup of blood in total, and evidence that someone had tried to clean up the stains. Ayla's mother, Trista Reynolds, was in a 10-day substance abuse treatment program when her daughter disappeared. The day before Ayla went missing, Trista had filed for sole custody. Ayla had been placed with her father by the Maine Department of Health and Human Services 2 months prior to her disappearance. Justin did not know about Trista's custody bid. In April of 2012, police found unspecified items of interest behind the Hathaway Creative Center in the Kennebec River, about a mile from DePietro's home. In May of 2012, nearly 6 months after Ayla vanished, authorities publicly stated that they believed she was dead, but did not believe that she had been abducted. Ayla was declared legally dead in 2017. The court recorded that she had died around the time she was reported missing. In December of 2018, 7 years after her disappearance, Trista filed a wrongful death suit against Justin. Although the suit seeks unspecified monetary damages, she stated the real goal of it was to get answers as to what happened to Ayla and to recover her body. Justin maintained his innocence in his daughter's case and stated he had no idea where she was. In his response to Trista's filing, Justin said he was innocent of any wrongdoing in Ayla's disappearance, and the blood in his house was from one time when she was sick. In 2022, the wrongful death suit was expanded in scope. Justin's mother, Phoebe DePietro, and sister, Alicia DePietro, were both added as defendants. Based on unspecified new evidence, Trista alleges the women played a role in Ayla's death and in the subsequent cover-up. Unfortunately, no one has been named as a suspect in Ayla's disappearance. Ayla Bell Reynolds remains missing to this day. 17-year-old Ivory Frances Green was last seen at her home at the A building of Washington Courts in Utica, New York at 4 p.m. on March 6, 2004. She called her mother later that night to say she was coming home for dinner. but she never made it. Ivory was never heard from again. She was going through a rebellious period at the time of her disappearance and was classified as a runaway for several years. 2 months after Ivory disappeared, Plummer Reed Jr., a distant relative of hers, called her mother and said he was going to tell her what happened to Ivory. Before he could do it, he was shot 3 times in the head, and the call disconnected, but Plummer survived his injuries. His cousin, Benji D. Reed, was later sent to prison for the attempted murder. Another man, Mikhail Williams, was also charged with attempted murder, but ultimately pleaded guilty to misdemeanor 4th-degree criminal facilitation and was sentenced to time served. Williams admitted to supplying Benji with a gun, and since the shooting incident, Plummer has denied knowing anything about Ivory's disappearance. Ivory associated with a number of drug dealers in the Utica area, although she didn't sell drugs herself. It's theorized that she willingly accompanied one of these people somewhere, and the person harmed her. And in 2007, authorities announced they believed that she had been murdered. Ivory may still be in upstate New York, possibly in Watertown, Syracuse, or Auburn. She could also be in the Tryon, New York area. Her mother says it's uncharacteristic of her to be out of touch with her loved ones. Ivory Frances Green's description is that of a 4'11" African-American woman. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She also has a mole above her upper lip, a scar behind her left ear, and an H-shaped scar on her shoulder. She was last seen wearing a dark winter coat, baggy jeans, and a black baseball cap with a bandana. She was 17 at the time of her disappearance, and she'd be 36 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to Ivory Frances Green, please contact the Utica City Police Department at 315-735-3301. Investigators believe they know what happened to Green, and they think they've already spoken to several people who know her whereabouts. Several of these individuals are currently incarcerated. Ivory Frances Green's case remains unsolved. "11-year-old Mikhail Biggs was last seen riding her bicycle near her family's residence in Mesa, Arizona on January 2nd, 1999. Mikhail and her younger sister thought they'd heard an ice cream truck's music in the distance and asked their mother for some money. Mikhail and her sister waited for the truck near Toltec Street and El Moro Avenue at approximately 5:50 p.m. Her sister became cold and returned to the family's home for a coat. Their mother sent her back for Mikhail, but she had disappeared. Mikhail's bicycle and her 2 quarters were found near the street where she had been standing. The bicycle was not at the corner, but partially back towards the house. It was lying on its side with the wheels still spinning. Mikhail and her sister were only separated for about 90 seconds. Authorities searched the entire area near Mikhail's family's home, but no evidence pertaining to her whereabouts was found. Search dogs lost her scent after only a few feet, suggesting that she was abducted by a vehicle and driven away. Authorities were unable to confirm if an ice cream truck was in the area at the time she vanished, but all ice cream vendors in the area were cleared of involvement in Mikhail's case. No one in the vicinity were also cleared of any connection to Mikhail. There have been many false leads in Mikhail's case. On January 9th, police dug up what appeared to be a freshly dug grave outside of Mesa, and they found nothing. 2 witnesses were put under hypnosis in hopes that they would remember something, but nothing came of that. A copper-colored Jeep was reportedly spotted near Mikhail's home at the time she was last seen, but when its driver was located, he was ruled out as a suspect, and he had seen nothing unusual. Houses in the neighborhood were searched with consent from their owners, but to no avail. Only one homeowner refused to permit a search. He is not considered a suspect. On March 10, 1999, a man reportedly tried to abduct 2 girls, a 10-year-old and an 11-year-old, from a schoolyard. Police thought the incident might have been connected to Mikhail's case, but the abduction was revealed to be a hoax. Investigators have released sketches of 2 possible suspects in the case. The sketches were not widely publicized, since authorities are not certain if the men are connected to her case. Mikhail's father believes he knows who was responsible for his daughter's apparent abduction. D. Blalak lived 2 blocks away from Mikhail's home in 1999. He had prior convictions for in 3 states. He was registered as a... In 2001, he was convicted of and trying to kill her. He is presently serving a 15.5-year sentence in an Arizona prison. His wife provided him an alibi for the time Mikhail disappeared, saying he was in their home garage the entire night. Mikhail's parents went to prison to visit him directly and asked him if he was involved in her disappearance, but he repeatedly told them he knew nothing about it. Mikhail's family now lives in Gilbert, Arizona. On the 5th anniversary of her disappearance, her family held a funeral for her with an empty casket. They believe Mikhail was murdered shortly after she disappeared. No charges have been filed against anyone in her case. Mikhail is described as an intelligent, artistic, and sociable person, and an honor student. She played the clarinet and was a member of her school student council at the time. She wanted to become an animator when she grew up. Her favorite color is purple, and she has 2 younger sisters and a younger brother. Mikhail Biggs' description is that of a 4'8" Caucasian girl. She has brown hair, hazel eyes, and prominent upper front teeth. Her ears are pierced and she has several moles on the left side of her neck. She was last seen wearing a red t-shirt with her elementary school's name Lindbergh on the front of it, bell-bottom jeans, and white canvas shoes. She was 11 at the time of her disappearance, and she would be 35 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to Mikhail Diane Biggs, please contact the Mesa Police Department at 480-644-2211. There are very few leads in Mikhail's disappearance. Sadly, her case remains unsolved to this day. "23-year-old Phoenix Lucille Colden was last seen sitting in her car in her driveway in the 12,600 block of Country Brook Drive in Spanish Lake, Missouri, on December 18, 2011. Her father saw her drive away at 2:20 p.m., and at 5:30 p.m., her car, a black 4-door 1998 Chevy Blazer with tinted windows and the Missouri license plate number KE2S6V, was found abandoned at an intersection in the 900 block of St. Clair Avenue in East St. Louis, Illinois. It was still running, and the driver's side door was open, but there was no sign of Colden at the scene. She's never been heard from again. The police had the car towed, not realizing it belonged to a missing person. Colden's loved ones described her as a responsible, intelligent, and deeply religious young woman. She had been homeschooled up until she graduated high school. She could play multiple musical instruments and was also a regional fencing champion. When Colden moved out of her house after turning 18, she told her parents she was moving in with one of her female friends. They later found out she was in fact living with a boyfriend, but she moved back in with her parents in 2011. She was a junior of the University of Missouri in St. Louis, but she didn't take any fall semester classes the year she disappeared. Phoenix Colden's description is that of a 5'3" to 5'6" African-American woman. She has dark brown hair and brown eyes, and her ears are pierced. She was last seen wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt, gray sweatpants with the word Lindenwood, or the letters USML on one leg, and dark sneakers. She was 23 at the time of her disappearance, and she would be 34 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to Phoenix Colden, please contact the St. Louis County Police Department at 314-615-5317. Little information is available in Phoenix Colden's disappearance, and she is missing under unknown circumstances. She may have traveled to Illinois or to San Francisco, California, after she disappeared. Phoenix Colden's case remains a mystery. 34-year-old Marie Chantal Deli was last seen leaving her cashier job at Walmart in a 3400 block of US 41 on Thai Miami Trail East in Naples, Florida, at approximately 4:35 p.m. on May 17, 2010. Her husband dropped her off at work at 8:30 a.m., but he doesn't know who picked her up. Surveillance cameras of the parking lot show her walking outside, but didn't record who she left with or whether she got into a car. She has never been heard from again. Deli has 2 daughters and 2 living sons. A third one died in an accident in 2002. Although she had left town on 2 previous occasions without telling her husband, she is a dedicated mother who would never have abandoned her children. She had worked for Walmart for 5 years before her disappearance and was considered a reliable employee. She doesn't have a driver's license. She may have not had her diabetes medication when she disappeared, and there hasn't been any activity on her bank accounts or any indication that she left the country. Deli and her husband of several years, Mathanael Darius, got into an argument the weekend before she went missing. They lived in an apartment off of Green Boulevard. Her family stated they argued frequently, and he occasionally abused her physically, something he denies. In October of 2015, he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in an unrelated case. He allegedly shot a man to death in an Orlando, Florida hotel parking lot. He is considered a person of interest in Deli's case as well, but hasn't been charged in connection with it. Marie Chantal Deli's description is that of a 5'9" to 5'10" African-American woman. She has dark brown hair and brown eyes. Deli has a large tattoo of an ornate cross and the name Tyrese on her right shoulder, along with a large tattoo of the name Mathanael on her left shoulder. She was last seen wearing a dark blue polo shirt and tan or khaki pants. She was 34 at the time of her disappearance, and she would be 46 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to Marie Chantal Deli, please contact the Collier County Sheriff's Office at 941-793-9300. Marie Chantal Deli's disappearance is considered suspicious, and the case remains unsolved. "25-year-old Aubry Dameron was last seen walking away from her mother's residence off 280 Road north of Grove, Oklahoma at 3 a.m. on March 9, 2019. She had messaged several people on Facebook asking for a ride from her mother's home, but no one responded, and it's unclear whether anyone picked her up. She has never been heard from again. She left home without her cell phone, her purse, or medication. She had been living with her former boyfriend, J.C. Pearson, in New Mexico, but left on August 18th and moved back in with her family in Oklahoma to get help for her alcohol and drug abuse. Pearson then moved to Colorado, and Dameron disappeared 6 months later. Danette Robotham, a former close friend of Dameron's, called Dameron's former boyfriend in Colorado, Jay Pearson, on March 12th and said that Dameron was being held against her will in Ketchum, Oklahoma, for drug money owed. Robotham said that if Dameron's captors didn't get the money they wanted, they were going to kill Dameron. She asked Pearson for money and said she'd contribute some of her own help to get Dameron released. When the police interviewed Robotham about what she told Pearson, she admitted her claim of kidnapping and ransom was untrue and was charged with extorting money from Pearson. When the authorities asked Robotham what she thought had really happened to Dameron, she said she didn't think Dameron was really missing, or that her parents really didn't know her whereabouts. Police also got a lead that Dameron's mother's boyfriend had said he had killed her, but they have been unable to confirm the story and haven't named any suspects in her disappearance. Aubry Dameron's description is that of a 5'9" to 5'10" transgender Native American woman. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She has a tattoo of a triquetra on the back of her neck, and a tattoo of the word shorty in a circular design on her upper left arm at the shoulder, and tattoos on both hips. She was last seen wearing a dark jacket, a dark shirt, a dark miniskirt, and dark leather boots with heels. She was 25 at the time of her disappearance, and she'd be 29 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to Aubry Dameron, please contact the Delaware County Sheriff's Office at 918-253-2700, or the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation at 918-582-9075. Because of her transgender identity and the fact that it's uncharacteristic of her to be out of touch with her family, she's considered to be at risk. Sadly, Aubry Dameron's case remains unsolved. 19-year-old Brittany Nicole Wood was last seen in Mobile, Alabama on May 30th, 2012. She said she was going to visit her uncle, Donald Paul Holland Sr., in the Styx River area. She apparently got a ride from him and was last seen getting in his car at 7:30 p.m. Her last cell phone signal was from that vicinity, but she never arrived and has never been heard from again. Her parents had reported her missing on June 2nd, 2012. Donald Sr. was found dead on June 1st, the day after Brittany was last seen. At the time of his death, he was under investigation for... He had been shot, and his death was ruled as a... But some people doubt this explanation, because the gunshot wound was in the back of Donald Sr.'s head, which is unusual for... Authorities found Brittany's cell phone battery in his truck after his death. In June and July of 2012, several members of Brittany's family were arrested. Ultimately, 11 people were charged with crimes including The arrested men included Brittany's brother, Derek Thomas Wood, her uncles Randall Scott Wood, and Dustin Alton Kent, her step-cousin Donald Paul Donnie Holland Jr., James Kumba, a Wood family member by marriage, and two friends of the Wood family, William Billy Brown Lee and Nelton Lloyd Butch Morgan. Brittany's maternal aunt, Wendy Wood Holland, Wendy's twin sister, Mendy Kent, who was Dustin's wife, Brittany's mother, Jessie Wood, and Jennifer Gonzalez Moore, a friend of the family, were also charged. There were multiple victims, and police described the case as one of the worst of its kind in the county. One teenage victim stated that she had first been abused while she was a toddler in diapers, and that her earliest memories involved being... Very young children would observe what was going on, and some of the women used sex. Authorities determined Brittany had been a victim of starting when she was 4 or 5. Police were planning on questioning her, but she disappeared before they could. Wendy Wood Holland was sentenced to 219 years in prison, Mendy Kent to 40 years, Dustin Kent to 17 years, and Randall Wood to a split sentence 15 years, of which he only served 3. Derek Wood and Donald Holland Jr. were both granted youthful offender status, meaning their records are sealed. Jessie Wood pleaded guilty to misdemeanor reckless endangerment and served no time. William Brown Lee was sentenced to 21 years, and Nelton Morgan to 10 years in prison and 5 years of probation. The case outcomes for James Kumba and Jennifer Gonzalez Moore are unknown. None of the trials and guilty pleas led to any further information about Brittany's whereabouts or fate. Brittany left behind a young daughter. She didn't have a car at the time of her disappearance, and her mother stated she would not have run away from home. Brittany Wood's description is that of a 5'3" Caucasian girl. She has blonde to brown hair and blue eyes. Her lips are pierced and she has a tattoo with the name Peyton surrounded by butterflies on her left leg. She was last seen wearing a blue t-shirt, blue denim shorts, and flip-flops. She was also carrying a pink or teal tote bag containing extra clothes, a red curling iron, a makeup bag, and a cell phone. She was 19 at the time of her disappearance, and she would be 30 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to Brittany Wood, please contact the Mobile Police Department at 251-208-7211. Authorities believe she may have been taken against her will and may have been murdered. Brittany Wood may still be in the local area, but sadly her whereabouts remain a mystery. One-year-old Vanessa Morales was last seen in Ansonia, Connecticut on November 29, 2019. She lived with her mother, Christine Holloway, on Myrtle Avenue. On December 2nd, Christine didn't show up for work and no one was able to get in touch with her. The police were sent to Christine's home on Myrtle Avenue to do a welfare check and found her body in the bathtub. She had been beaten to death. There was no sign of Vanessa, and she's never been heard from again. Vanessa's father, Jose Morales, was dating Christine at the time of her death. He was arrested for unrelated firearms charges in December, the day after Christine's body was found. Within 2 weeks, he'd been named a suspect in Christine's murder, and in February he was charged with murder and evidence tampering in her case. He has not been charged in the connection with his daughter's disappearance, however. Jose is the last person known to have been with Vanessa. She wasn't with him at the time of his arrest, and he denies any involvement in her case or in Christine's death. He told investigators he was in the bathroom at the Myrtle Avenue residence when he looked out the window and saw 2 men running towards the front door. Jose said he was under the influence of the drug PCP at the time, and that he tried calling 911, but was punched in the face and knocked out. The next thing he remembered was driving to his residence in New Haven, Connecticut. There was a call placed to 911 from Jose's phone at 1:52 p.m. on December 1st. It pinged off a tower 1 street over from Christine's house. During the call, a slurred male voice said Myrtle Avenue, but didn't give an exact address, even after the dispatcher asked multiple times. When the audio recording was enhanced, a female voice could be heard in the back room saying, "Stop, hang up, who are you calling?" The call was disconnected a short time later. According to neighbors, Jose left Christine's home only about a half an hour before the police arrived to check on her welfare and found her body. A day earlier, Jose's car had been seen on video surveillance footage near a clothing donation bin in Derby, Connecticut. Workers sorting items in the bin found several blood-stained items, including a puzzle, a man's shirt, and a children's book. The blood was Christine's. Some of Vanessa's belongings were never found, including a pink, purple, green, and blue teething keyring, a white blanket with multicolored polka dots, and a heather gray Eddie Bauer First Adventure backpack-style diaper bag. Christine had an iPhone 8 with a black case, which was also missing, and last pinged in the Naugatuck, Connecticut area. Authorities believe Vanessa may still be alive, and still somewhere in Connecticut. Her father hasn't provided any information on her disappearance or Christine's murder. Vanessa Morales' description is that of a 2-foot Caucasian infant. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She was 1 at the time of her disappearance, and she would be 4 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to Vanessa Morales, please contact the Ansonia Police Department at 203-735-1885. Jose Morales is awaiting trial in Christine's death, while Vanessa's case remains unsolved. "19-year-old Long Island, New York native Tammy Mahoney resided with her boyfriend in the 100 block of Lenox Avenue in Oneida, New York. She had studied husbandry at SUNY Morrisville campus during the 1979 to 1980 school year and stated she wanted to become a veterinarian, but she did not return to school for the second year. Mahoney was last seen hitchhiking near Glenwood Shopping Center on Route 46 in Oneida at 7:45 a.m. on May 8, 1981. She planned to travel to Hamilton, New York during the evening. Authorities believe that a group of unidentified young men gave Mahoney a ride to the Oneida Indian Nation Territory, which occupies 32 acres of land along Route 46. Mahoney's boyfriend reported her as a missing person on May 11, 1981, 3 days after her disappearance. She had been employed as a groom at Vernon Downs, but quit her job a week before she went missing. She did not tell anyone of this, and left her apartment every morning as if she was going to work. She had applied for another job in the newsroom at the Oneida Daily Dispatch, and stated on the application that she had left her previous job because it was too far away from her home. She often hitchhiked to work when she could not find friends to give her a ride. Mahoney and her boyfriend were planning to move out of their apartment in May of 1981, and she left behind all of her belongings packed for the move, including her toothbrush. Her family lived in Long Island, New York at the time of her disappearance. They stated that she was close to them and kept in regular contact, and they did not believe she would have left without warning. Investigators believe Mahoney was and murdered at a party inside a trailer on the Oneida Indian Nation territory shortly after she was last seen. Authorities received a tip that Mahoney's body was inside a building that burned down on Lenox Avenue on May 11th. An extensive search of the area produced no clues as to her whereabouts. Mahoney's disappearance was reclassified as a probable homicide sometime afterwards. Investigators announced that they had identified several male suspects in Mahoney's presumed murder in the spring of 2002. The men's names have not been publicly released, but not all the suspects are members of the Oneida Indian Nation. Authorities said that dozens of witnesses were inside the trailer at the time of her homicide, and the murder suspects still live in the local area. The federal government will prosecute Mahoney's case, since she was allegedly killed on Indian Nation property. Investigators cannot file charges against anyone until her body is recovered. A man's wallet was turned in to authorities by an unidentified individual several days after Mahoney disappeared. The wallet was located on the territory, and investigators said it was connected to her case. The identity of its owner has not been divulged, but officials requested that the person who recovered the item contact detectives in order to obtain additional evidence. Someone scrawled a message in the names of two alleged suspects on a reward flyer posted in a guy, a girl, and a laundromat in Vernon, New York in March of 2002. Investigators made a public plea for photos of the Indian Nation territory and any junked vehicles from May 1981 around the same time. Authorities announced that Mahoney's body may have been placed inside one of those cars immediately after the murder. Officials searched a gravel-covered lot near the Shakowee Cultural Center on the territory in late June 2002. A pond was located in the area at the time Mahoney vanished, but it was filled sometime afterwards. No evidence was uncovered during the search. Investigators said they did not believe her remains were still inside the car, but materials related to her case may be inside the vehicle. Tammy Mahoney's description is that of a 5'3" Caucasian woman. She has brown hair and green eyes. Mahoney's ears are pierced and she has freckles. She was last seen wearing a dark-colored V-neck sweater or sweatshirt, blue jeans and sneakers. She was 19 at the time of her disappearance, and she would be 61 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to Tammy Mahoney's case, please contact the Madison County Sheriff's Department at 315-366-2289 or Oneida Police Department at 315-363-9111. Unfortunately, Tammy Mahoney's whereabouts have yet to be found. 22-year-old Christina Voltaire was last seen at her apartment on Avenue K Southeast in Winter Haven, Florida, on January 8, 2011. She lived alone in the Brickshire Apartments complex and was attending Kaiser University, studying nuclear medicine. A close friend, Charles Pierre Gilly, lived in the same complex. On the day of Voltaire's disappearance, Charles' car broke down and he walked back to her apartment to borrow her car, arriving there at 7 p.m. She was dressed in a black robe and was sitting in bed, drinking tea and doing her homework. She told Charles she didn't feel too well. He spent a few minutes with her before leaving, locking the door behind him. He drove Voltaire's car, a tan 2001 Hyundai Elantra with the Florida license plate number LOOHM, back to his own vehicle to look over the damage. When Charles returned to Voltaire's apartment about 45 minutes later, she was gone. Her purse, laptop, and keys were there. The robe she'd been wearing was lying on the bed, and there was no indications of a struggle. Charles became suspicious as hours passed without Voltaire returning home. He checked the windows in her apartment and nothing was loose. It was he who reported her missing. Christina Voltaire has never been heard from again. Voltaire's 1-year-old daughter died of undetermined causes almost a year prior to her disappearance. Her family stated she was coping with the death, as well as might be expected. She planned to move back to Palm Bay, Florida, where many of her family members lived, transfer to Kaiser University campus there, and visit her mother in Haiti in the spring. She didn't have a cell phone or credit cards, making her difficult to track. Her passport expired and there was no evidence that she left the country. Disciol Pierre Gilly, Charles' brother, was Voltaire's boyfriend. Voltaire had told her father he was physically aggressive and jealous, and that she was afraid of him. Disciol had been charged with aggravated assault with a firearm in connection with a shooting in 2008, but he was acquitted. Although Charles was extremely cooperative with the police investigating Voltaire's disappearance, Disciol refused to speak to them and hired a lawyer. In a media interview, Disciol said that he and Voltaire had ended their relationship on good terms 8 to 10 months before she went missing, after he found out he was not the father of her daughter. He maintains his innocence in Voltaire's disappearance and said he was never abusive to her. Disciol said that he believed Charles and Voltaire were romantically involved, which is something that Charles denies. Christina Voltaire's description is that of a 5'2" African-American woman. She has dark brown hair and brown eyes. She was last seen wearing a dark nightgown. She was 22 at the time of her disappearance, and she would be 34 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to Christina Voltaire, please contact the Winter Haven Police Department at 863-291-5858. Due to the circumstances involving Christina Voltaire's case, investigators believe she may be in danger. Her case remains unsolved. 59-year-old Ray Grieger was last seen on April 15, 2005, in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. He took a half a day off from work and left his place of employment, driving his 2004 Mini Cooper, which is red with a white top and vanity license plate. Ray called his longtime girlfriend, Patty Fornicola, on his cell phone at 11:30 a.m. and said he was driving east-northeast on Route 192 toward Lewisburg in Union County, Pennsylvania. He never arrived home, and Fornicola reported him missing at 11:30 p.m. that same day. There has been no activity on his cell phone, email, bank accounts, or credit cards since he vanished. Ray has been the Center County District Attorney for 20 years and had decided to retire in December and not seek re-election. He is described as a hardworking and dedicated lawyer. He was involved in some high-profile cases, but authorities stated that no threats had been made against him, and they did not believe his disappearance had anything to do with his job. His loved ones reported he felt overworked and fatigued before he went missing. He was so exhausted that Fornicola suggested he see a doctor, but he apparently did not do so. The day after Ray vanished, his car was found in a dirt parking lot on the outskirts of Lewisburg in Union County, near the Susquehanna River, 45 miles east of Bellefonte. There was no sign of him at the scene and no signs of foul play, but cigarette ashes were found inside his vehicle, and Ray dislikes cigarette smoke and would be unlikely to allow someone to smoke in his car. Ray's cell phone was locked inside the vehicle and a water bottle was also found. Ray's DNA was on the bottle, indicating he drank from it. The Mini Cooper's keys were missing and have never been found. An antique store was close by, and its proprietor thought Ray might have been in his shop that day, but this has not been confirmed. The store owner said the man he saw appeared to be waiting for someone. Ray is interested in antiques and had been in the store before. None of Ray's luggage, clothing, or other belongings were found to be missing from his home he shared with Fornicola, but his county-issued laptop and sunglasses disappeared with him. The laptop's case and charger were left behind. In late July 2005, Ray's laptop was found by a fisherman in the Susquehanna River, lodged against a bridge support several hundred yards from where his car had been found. It was determined that the hard drive had been removed before the computer was thrown into the water. Investigators stated that the computer had been in the river for quite some time, possibly since the time Ray vanished. His family said he did not normally take his laptop with him on trips. In late October of 2005, over 6 months after Ray's disappearance, his computer hard drive was found on the banks of the Susquehanna River. The hard drive was so badly damaged, however, that investigators were unable to obtain any clues from it. They later discovered that before his disappearance, Someone had done searches on Grieker's home computer for how to wreck a hard drive and water damage to a notebook computer. Ray's brother Roy J. Grieker disappeared under similar circumstances in Dayton, Ohio in May of 1996. He told his wife he was going out to buy some mulch and never returned, and later his body was pulled from the Great Miami River. Roy's drowning was ruled as a... Authorities investigated the possibility that Ray suffered from depression and took his own life as his brother did, but there is no evidence to support this theory. There were possible sightings of him in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania on April 18th, and in several other states across the country in the months after he went missing. But the sightings have not been confirmed, and most of them are not considered credible. Police examined the district attorney's financial accounts after Ray vanished, but found no discrepancies in any of them. Authorities are uncertain what caused Ray's disappearance. Foul play is being considered as a possibility, but there is little evidence to support any theory. His girlfriend and daughter both passed polygraph tests after he vanished, and neither woman is considered a suspect. Ray's daughter lives in Seattle, Washington. She says she and her father were close, spoke on the phone frequently, and spent several weeks together each year. Authorities considered administering polygraph tests to Ray's nephews and his two ex-wives, but decided not to. He maintained an amicable relationship with his daughter's mother, whom he divorced in 1991, but reportedly did not get along with his other ex-wife. Ray enjoys antiques, traveling, and outdoor activities. He was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and got his law degree at Case Western Reserve University in that city. He moved to Pennsylvania in the early 80s. He kept a low profile at his job despite its public nature. Ray Grieker's description is that of a 6-foot Caucasian man. He has graying brown hair and green eyes. He was last seen wearing a blue fleece jacket, blue jeans, and sneakers. He was 59 at the time of his disappearance, and he would be 77 now if he was found. If you have any information in regards to Ray Grieker, please contact the Bellefonte Police Department at 814-353-2320. Ray Grieker was declared legally dead in July of 2011, but his case remains unsolved, and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance are still unclear. 70-year-old Sandra Ecker was last seen at her home near the Country Dale Elementary School in Franklin, Wisconsin at 11:30 p.m. on March 26, 2021. Her husband, Wes Eckert Sr., stated they got into an argument over his late mother's will, and Sandra wanted him to contest it. He said Sandra got up, got dressed, and appeared to be preparing to leave, saying, "You'll hear from my lawyer." He took her car keys away and told her that they would talk about the issue the next day. The couple slept in separate bedrooms, and Wes did not see his wife after going to bed. When he woke up in the morning, Sandra and his own car were missing. She still had a key for it. He said she also took several $1,000s in cash. She has never been heard from again. Early in the morning at 3 a.m. on March 27th, Wes's gray 2005 Dodge Stratus with a Wisconsin license plate number 319 LGT was sighted traveling southbound on Rayson Avenue, westbound on Tans Drive, and southbound on Crowbar Drive in Muskego, Wisconsin, about 8 miles from the Eckert home. It has not been seen since. Sandra's daughter said she didn't believe her mother would have taken her father's car or driven anywhere in the middle of the night. Some of the couple's 4 children believe their father could have been involved in her disappearance. Wes denies this and theorizes Sandra met with foul play at the hands of someone who intended to rob her. Investigators believe Sandra was the victim of foul play and stated they have 2 persons of interest in her disappearance. Sandra's case remains unsolved. Sandra Eckert's description is that of a 5'7" Caucasian woman with blonde hair and green eyes, and her ears are pierced. She was 70 at the time she vanished, and would be 71 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to the case, please contact the Franklin Police Department at 414-425-2522. 27-year-old Amanda Nicole Town was last seen at her aunt's residence in the 13,400 block of 99th Street in a rural area north of Fellsmere, Florida, at about 3 a.m. on March 2, 2020. She showed up in the night while her aunt and her aunt's husband were asleep, spoke to her nephew, then left again. She told her nephew she was planning to walk back to her boyfriend's home, half a mile south on North Hickory Street. Her boyfriend stated she had never arrived, and she has never been heard from again. According to her family, Town had a troubled history, including substance abuse, and was staying at various relatives' homes at the time of her disappearance. She had lost custody of her 3 children, who were placed with a family member, and just before she went missing, she had lost her job. In spite of problems in her life, she could always be reached by phone and never lost touch with her children, or went more than a couple days without contacting her family. Since Town was last seen, there's been no activity on her bank accounts or cell phone. It's also led to believe that her case may be linked to the murder of Aaliyah Beamer. 38-year-old Beamer moved from Indiana to Florida about 6 weeks prior to her disappearance, from Fellsmere on January 31, 2022. She was found murdered on February 11th. Investigators haven't said how she died or where she was found, but they stated they haven't ruled out the possibility that Town's case was related. Unfortunately, Beamer's murder and Town's disappearance remain unsolved. Amanda Town's description is that of a 5'2" Caucasian woman, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Town's ears are pierced and she has a tattoo of a butterfly on her right shoulder. She was 27 at the time she vanished, and would be 30 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to the case, please contact the Indian River County Sheriff's Office at 772-569-6700. 62-year-old Angelica Marrero was last seen in St. Petersburg, Florida, on February 28, 2020. A relative reported her missing on March 2nd after she didn't show up to work. She has never been heard from again. At the time of her disappearance, Angelica lived with her ex-husband, George Marrero, in a home on 81st Avenue North in the Gateway Plaza area. They had divorced in 2018, but still lived together and dated each other. One neighbor said that they often had noisy fights. George stated she had simply walked out the door on the day of her disappearance and never came back. However, video surveillance footage showed Angelica going into the house. The cameras never showed her leaving. Video from a neighbor's doorbell camera showed George removing a large object, wrapped in a blanket or tarp, from his house at 1 a.m. and putting it in the trunk of his car. A search of the home and 2 vehicles turned up with unspecified biological evidence linked to Angelica. Although her body has not been found, on April 3rd, the medical examiner issued a death certificate for Angelica, saying she was a victim of homicide by unspecified means. That same day, George was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in his ex-wife's case. George is still awaiting trial on Angelica's presumed death. Angelica Marrero's description is that of a 5'1" to 5'2" Caucasian woman with blonde hair and brown eyes. She was 62 at the time she vanished, and would be 65 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to the case, please contact the St. Petersburg Police Department at 727-893-7780. Foul play is suspected in her case due to the circumstances involved. Unfortunately, Angelica's case remains unsolved. 25-year-old Dexter Pelt disappeared with a friend, 20-year-old John DeBose. The 2 men flew from their home state of Alabama to California on November 4, 2021, to visit friends. They landed in Sacramento and were seen getting into a dark blue 4-door sedan, possibly a Nissan or a Toyota, which left the airport a little after 11 a.m. Pelt and DuBose were last seen just south of Gridley, California, which is 60 miles north of Sacramento. Neither of them have been heard from again. A hunter found DuBose's cell phone in the woods in the Sutter Bypass Wildlife Area, on the northwest side of State Route 99, Feather River Bridge crossing, near the town of Nicholas, California. Unfortunately, a search of the surrounding area turned up with no other clues. In December of 2021, Ricardo Benelos Villarreal and Alfredo Benelos Villarreal, both residents of Gridley, were charged with 2 counts of murder in the missing men's cases. They knew Pelt and DuBose and had allegedly sent marijuana to them in Alabama. Investigators believe that the two killed Pelt and DuBose at a house in Gridley and hid their bodies. Blood-matching DNA from one of the missing men was found in Ricardo's detached garage. Ricardo has been arrested, but Alfredo remains at large. He may be driving a 2008 Nissan Altima with a California license plate number 6VAR204. Ricardo was tried for the murders in September of 2022. However, the jury was unable to reach a verdict, deadlocking at 9-3 for conviction. His retrial is set for spring of 2023. LaDexter Tequan Pelt's description is that of a 5'11" African-American man with dark hair and brown eyes. He was 25 at the time he vanished, and would be 26 now if he was found. John DuBose's description is that of a 5'9" African-American man with dark hair and brown eyes. If you have any information in regards to the case, please contact the Butte County Sheriff's Office at 530-538-7434. Although Pelt and DuBose's remains have not been located, foul play is suspected in their disappearances due to the circumstances involved. Both Pelt and DuBose have yet to be found. 24-year-old Michaela Williams was last seen in Indianapolis, Indiana on November 8, 2021. That day she had left her mother's home in the 4800 block of North Kenmore Road and got into a gray or white pickup truck with a loud engine. She was last seen at a home in the 3400 block of North Leland Avenue. That evening she left the residence and has never been heard from again. Her cell phone last pinged along Kentucky Avenue shortly after she disappeared. A man named Destin or Beston Hull may have been the last person to see Williams prior to her disappearance. Authorities stated they were seeking Hull for questioning in her case. They didn't classify him as a suspect, but said he might have some information. Authorities also believe Williams may have traveled to Flint, Michigan after her disappearance. Although police stated foul play is not suspected in her case, her disappearance is considered highly unusual. She always kept in touch with her family and let them know her whereabouts. Michaela D. Williams' description is that of a 5'3" to 5'5" African-American woman with reddish dark hair and brown eyes. She has a tattoo of a dove and flowers on her right forearm, and a tattoo of a rosary with 3 banners on her upper arm. She also has a tattoo on the back of her right shoulder and a tattoo on her abdomen. She was 24 at the time she vanished, and she'd be 25 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to the case, please contact the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department at 317-327-3811. Unfortunately, Michaela Williams' case remains unsolved. 35-year-old Tiffany Foster was last seen leaving her home at Lakeside Apartments in the 2800 block of Lakeside Way in Noonan, Georgia on March 1, 2021. The last time her cell phone was active was at 2:58 p.m. when it pinged just north of Amlajack Boulevard. She has never been heard from again. At the time of her disappearance, Foster was a criminal justice major at Georgia Military College and worked as a security guard at HelloFresh. She missed her college classes on March 2nd, and on March 5th, she didn't show up for her shift or call in sick, which is uncharacteristic of her behavior. On March 8th, her recently purchased dark blue 2020 Nissan Altima with a temporary Georgia license plate number P1996240 was found abandoned 30 miles away in College Park, Georgia, with some of her belongings inside, including her purse, keys, and only credit card. Authorities arrested Foster's fiancé, Reginald Robertson, on charges of kidnapping and aggravated assault in April of 2021. Investigators stated that the charges were unrelated to Foster's disappearance and stemmed from a domestic violence incident between her and Robertson in November of 2020. It's not clear if Robertson is a suspect in her case, but investigators learned that he had moved Foster's car from Noonan to College Park days after she went missing, and he was charged with theft as a result. The charge was later dropped, and he's not been cooperative with the investigation into her disappearance. Tiffany Foster's description is that of a 5'2" African-American woman. She has dark hair and hazel eyes. She has a large red birthmark from her back down to her left arm, and has a heart-shaped tattoo on the back of her right shoulder that reads Big Sister 12797. She was 35 at the time that she vanished. If you have any information in regards to the case, please contact the Coweta County Sheriff's Office at 678-423-6711. Tiffany Foster's disappearance is considered suspicious, and unfortunately her case remains unsolved. 19-year-old Sydney West was last seen on September 30th, 2020. A rideshare driver drove her to the Crissy Field area of San Francisco, California, and dropped her off near the Golden Gate Bridge at 6:45 a.m. She has never been heard from again, and it's uncharacteristic for her to be out of touch with her family. After Sydney's disappearance, her backpack with some of her belongings was found in an area on the Golden Gate Bridge that she liked to visit. She would go there to admire the view, take photographs, and go running. Although the bridge has security cameras, fog and poor air quality from nearby wildfires often obstructed the view on the morning West disappeared, and the footage offered little evidence as to what happened. Since Sydney disappeared, there's been no activity on her cell phone, bank and credit cards, and social media accounts. Her phone and her Bose headphones were not found with her backpack and have never been recovered. West grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and attended Foothill High School in Pleasanton, California, until her family moved to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. She had a very active lifestyle and was co-captain on her high school's volleyball team. She was also interested in writing, music, and other arts. After graduating high school in 2019, she took a gap year, then returned to California to attend college. When she began her first year of classes in 2020, she was still recovering from a concussion she had the past summer. She found online learning difficult and decided to withdraw and defer classes until the fall 2021 semester, and she lived with friends in the Bay Area while she was waiting to go back to school. Sydney West's description is that of a 5'10" Caucasian woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her ears are pierced, and she may also wear glasses. She was 19 at the time she vanished, and would be 21 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to the case, please contact the San Francisco Police Department at 415-553-0123. Sadly, Sydney West's case remains a mystery. 47-year-old Lillian Lisette Max was last seen when she boarded a Greyhound bus in Birmingham, Alabama, en route to Atlanta, Georgia, on May 2, 2021. She borrowed $500 for the trip and said she had to go to a legal hearing regarding her immigration status. She has never been heard from again. Authorities subsequently learned that there was no hearing scheduled for her in Atlanta, and she may have never arrived there. She was reported missing on May 7th after she missed several appointments back in Alabama. She left all of her belongings behind. Max had lived in Coleman, Alabama for about a decade prior to her disappearance, and had previously lived in New York and California. She was well known in the local community and operated a business, the Aesthetica Lilium Hair Salon in Creel Plaza. Her friends believe she was from Mexico, and a legal permanent resident trying to get her citizenship. However, police stated she was actually from Honduras and was not a legal U.S. resident at the time of her disappearance. Prior to her vanishing, Max had canceled her cell phone service. The rent of her business was left unpaid, as were her utility bills. Investigators think Max left on her own accord and may not want to be found. They also think Lillian Max may not be her real name. Lillian Lisette Max's description is that of a 5'4" Hispanic woman with dark hair and brown eyes. She has tattoos on her chest. She was 47 years old at the time of her disappearance and would be 48 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to the case, please contact the Coleman Police Department at 256-734-1434. Her case remains unsolved, and she has remained listed as a missing person until her whereabouts and her well-being are confirmed. 29-year-old Tabitha Yvette Queen was last seen in Bastrop, Louisiana on May 10, 2021. Her 3 children were found at home alone. The oldest child, a 10-year-old, said Queen had left at 11 a.m. to go to the store. She went to the Save You More grocery store and was shown there on the store's video surveillance. She's never been heard from again. Her vehicle was later found abandoned on West Pine Street in Morehouse Parish, Louisiana. Video surveillance footage showed an unidentified African-American man parking the car there and walking away eastbound. Queen had been arguing with a man whom she had loaned her car to for a few days before her disappearance. When the man returned the car to Queen, there was a strange smell, and when she checked the car over, she found blood in the area where the spare tire was stored. Queen then told the man he could no longer use her car, and he cursed at her and threatened to kill her. Later that same day, a van came by the house and someone tried to kidnap Queen. It's unclear whether the incident with the man who borrowed Queen's car has anything to do with her disappearance. Tabitha Yvette Queen's description is that of a 5'4" African-American woman with dark hair and brown eyes. Her ears are pierced and she has a scar on her left arm. She has tattoos of the word legend on her chest, stars on one arm, and a marijuana leaf on her left backside. She was 29 years old at the time of her disappearance, and would be 30 now if she was found. If you have any information in regards to the case, please contact the Bastrop Police Department at 318-281-1322. Police stated that they had a person of interest in her disappearance, but named no suspects. Sadly, Tabitha Yvette Queen's case remains unsolved.